right? It's telling us very clearly that this isn't the path that we want to be on. And if you're here this morning and you're thinking, well, look, man, I'm not an evil person. You know, I think about other people. I don't need to worry about this self-directed path. I'm okay. But look at the language here. I mean, when it's saying stuff like, don't think about it, turn away, keep moving. You see, this is the kind of language that's saying that you're going to be enticed to follow this self-directed path. You're going to be tempted to follow this self-directed path. And you know what makes it more challenging is the fact that the moment that we're born, our inclination, the direction that we're going to go by default is to the self-directed path. It's to this path. And so we've got to pay strong attention to what the Bible says, because the Bible's trying to warn us about heading in this direction. And this is why. Because the self-directed path comes with painful consequences. You see, on this path, we decide that we're the source of our own happiness, right? And maybe we don't say that we're the source of our own happiness, but on this path, we believe that we can take it for ourselves. That we can take it for ourselves. You see, the Bible tells us that true happiness, true fulfillment, true joy in life only comes from a relationship with God. But the self-directed path actually takes us away from a relationship with God. It leads us in the other direction. And when we're searching this out, because we're not finding it, because it's not down this path, we can become consumed by it. When we stay on this path long enough, searching for it, we become consumed by it. Look at the warning in verse 16. It says, "For evil people can't sleep until they've done their evil deed for that day. They can't rest until they've caused someone to stumble. They eat the food of wickedness and drink the wine of violence." Now, I mean, that sounds pretty bad. I mean, that sounds like some pretty bad folks, don't you think? I mean, I would not like to put myself in that category. I mean, when I think about it, it reminds me of all these Living Dead movies that have been coming out the last couple of years. You know, these zombie movies where you've got these empty shell of a person wandering around with this insatiable hunger. You know, they're wandering around with this insatiable hunger, and it doesn't matter how much they devour, it doesn't matter who they devour, but it's like they're never satisfied. It's like they're on a search to find something that they can't ever find. And when we're walking down this self-directed path, we become consumed with trying to find that joy and that happiness ourselves. And it starts to look very similar. You know, we can't rest until we find it for ourselves, no matter what different little places we might be looking for it. You know, we compel others to follow after us because it justifies the choices that we're making, the decisions that we're making. And you know, the scariest thing is that if we stay on this path long enough, we don't know how to get off. We don't know how to get off. I mean, think of it like an addiction. I don't know how many of you have known somebody that struggles with an addiction, but you can see the devastation that it creates in their life. You know, it might start off at first as something recreational, something that's just done for fun, but then soon enough it begins to take over their body. I mean, it just like, it takes them over. The only thing they're thinking about is how to get that next fix. And you can tell by the choices that they're making that they're willing to sacrifice family and friends for it. You know, I've had the experience of seeing people very close to me struggle with this, and it's caused destruction in their life. They've lost their families, and they've even lost their freedom. They've lost their children. And this is the outcome of the self-directed path. It's pain, it's loneliness, and destruction. And again, if you stay on it long enough, you don't know how to get off. And the Bible describes it as stumbling in the dark. Look what it says. It says, but the way of the wicked is like total darkness. They have no idea what they're stumbling over. I mean, have you ever stumbled in the dark? I remember a time when I was 13 years old, and I'm sitting down at the dinner table with my family. We're having a nice dinner, or it might have been after dinner, but there was something in my room that I needed to go get, and I could look from that table, I could look up the stairs and see the second floor where the rooms were, and it was dark, right? It was dark, and at 13 years old, I was still afraid of the dark. And so I was the type of person that as I'm walking through the house, I'm flipping on every single light that I'm coming across, right? Because I don't want to be in the dark. But this time, I said to myself, you can do it. You can get up in there, get what you want, and get out, and you don't even have to turn the light on. So I headed out from the table. I ran up the stairs. I was running across the hallway and got to my room, and bam! I ran into my door, right? Now remember, I'm afraid of the dark. And I ran into my door, and reason is telling me that door was closed. You just miscalculated it. But I never closed my door. And so everything else was telling me, man, something closed that door, or someone closed that door. And so I'm fumbling around, I'm stumbling in the dark, trying to open the door, trying to find a light switch. Well, I finally do get what I needed and walk downstairs, and I sure did. While I was walking downstairs trying to act like nothing ever happened. I know I made a bunch of noise, but I acted like everything was fine, everything was okay. But I've stumbled a few other times in my life before as well. And one of the times I remember is I was in my mid-20s, and I'm in my basement in tears, crying, frustrated. You see, I was living my life my way. I was trying to live my life by my rules. I was on the self-directed path, and nothing was working out for me. I was frustrated. I was upset. I was on my way to becoming a terrible father, husband, really a terrible person. And it seemed like all the avenues that I was trying to find that success, find that joy, find that fulfillment in life, I just spent my time stumbling around. I was stumbling around, and I was looking up to God that night like, God, why? Why is it not working out? And you know what I found out that night? I found out that I don't give directions good. Because my directions for my own life were bad. They were bad directions. But you know what I also found out? I found out that God doesn't want us to be walking down this path that leads to pain. He doesn't want us stumbling in the dark. He doesn't want us on this self-directed path. Remember that self-directed path? That path leads us away from God. God's always wanted a relationship with us. So you know what God did? Not just for me, but He did something for all of us. See, God has provided us another path. God has provided us another path to follow, but He's also provided us a guide on that path. You see, the God-directed path, wisdom is our guide. If you remember the first week of this series, we talked about Solomon, a man who could have asked for whatever he wanted, and he asked for wisdom. Well, you know why Solomon asked for wisdom? is because he knew that a life lived down a self-directed path just leads to ruin, pain, and destruction. But he knew that a life lived by the wisdom of God would be a life where he would find everything that he was looking for. Everything that he was looking for. And you know, Solomon believed so much that this was the path to choose for his destiny, that he spoke to his children about it. And he speaks to us about it even. Look at in verse 10. My child, listen to me and do as I say, and you will have a long, good life. I will teach you wisdom's ways and lead you in straight paths. When you walk, you won't be held back. When you run, you won't stumble. Take hold of my instruction. Don't let them go. Guard them, for they are the key to life. You see, the thing we've got to remember is wisdom is the ability to apply God's truth to your life. Wisdom is the ability to live and make decisions with God's perspective in mind, not yours. God's perspective in mind. You know, throughout the book of Proverbs, wisdom is personified. It's talked, it's mentioned like a person that's there to guide us and to direct us and to protect us. Look what it says in verse 6. Don't turn your back on wisdom, for she will protect you. Love her, and she will guard you. You see, that self-directed path is always leading us away from God. But if we're willing to listen to wisdom, if we're willing to allow wisdom to be our guide, we don't have to live in the dark anymore. We don't have to stumble around in the dark. We can live life in the light of God's truth. In the light of God's truth. And this is why that the God-directed path leads to a joyful life. It's because it leads us to God. It leads us to a relationship with God. God never wanted us to walk around in the dark, stumbling, struggling in life. See, but the problem is that the moment that we were born with a wicked heart. A wicked heart with an inclination to follow that self-directed path. We were born with the desire to live life by our own rules. We were born with the desire to want to be at the center of the universe. Everything revolving around us. And there's nothing that we could do to fix it. That's the station that we're in. We're stuck in this. But remember, God doesn't want us to be there. He wants a relationship with us. This is why the Bible tells us that if we put our trust in Jesus, that if we believe that Jesus gave his life on the cross for the forgiveness of our sins. See, the Bible tells us that natural bent that we have in life is sinful. That natural desire to do things our own way is sinful, and it separates us from God. But God took care of it. He made it possible for us when we put our trust in Jesus to be transformed from the inside out. You know, the Bible tells us that we become new people. We become a new creation in Christ. Well, you know what comes along with that new creation? It's a new heart. A heart that has new desires. A heart that wants to pursue God. A heart that wants to follow God on the God-directed path. He gives us the ability to follow him now, to choose this God-directed path. But you know, even when we put our trust in Jesus, that sinful nature that has been replaced, it still lingers with us while we're here on this earth. And so that's why we've got to be very careful. We've got to be careful, and we have to guard our hearts. Because every day we're going to be enticed. You know, that mentioned that self-directed path is like the most popular, because everything that all the inputs that we get in everyday life is really compelling us to go that direction. This is why Solomon says this, "My child, pay attention to what I say. Listen carefully to my words and don't lose sight of them. Let them penetrate deep into your heart, for they bring life to those who find them and healing to their whole body." It says, "Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." Determines your destiny. So how do you guard this heart? You know, when the Bible talks about heart, it's not just talking about that organ that pumps blood around your body. Here, when it's talking about heart, it's talking about your innermost being. It's talking about who you are, the part of you that makes choices, the part of you that makes decisions, the part of you that carries your desires and your hopes. And he's telling us to guard it, because there's a part of us that wants to travel down the self-directed path and take happiness for ourselves, take joy for ourselves, create it ourselves. But joy, fulfillment in life only comes from God. And so he says, guard your heart. So how do you guard your heart? He says, pay attention. Listen to what he says. Listen carefully. Don't lose sight. You see, God's wisdom is found in his word. It's found in the Bible. But if you're never reading the Bible, how are you going to be able to follow the direction of God's wisdom? How are you going to be able to protect your heart? You know, when I was 18 and I graduated high school, my parents bought me a Bible for my graduation present. That was my graduation present. You know, and admittedly at the time I was like, a Bible. And it was nice. It had all the kind of the gold trim on the edge of each page, you know. And as I graduated, moved out of my parents' house, got married, was living my life, every now and then we would show up to church, and I would bring my Bible. And my dad always had something to say about it. He would always mess with me. He was poking me. He says, that Bible, that's a good-looking Bible. Looks brand new, right? Looks brand new. It's because I didn't open it. I didn't open it. I didn't read the Bible for myself until I was 27 years old, because I was going down my self-directed path. This is why I was stumbling in the dark. God had provided me a guide for life, godly wisdom. I had it right there with me, but I never read it. That's how we guard our hearts, is we've got to pursue God, and we've got to pursue him in his word. There's a reason that at the beginning of this series, we challenged everybody with a Bible reading challenge. You know, we challenge you to read one chapter a day in Proverbs to go along with this sermon series, because we understand that God's wisdom is in his word. And if we don't have God's wisdom, how can it be a guide for us? At the beginning of this series, we challenge you to join a small group. And we do this because we believe that it's healthy and it's important to pursue God with other people. If you're not pursuing God with other people, you're missing an important part of guarding your heart. We have a Pursue God website. A website that talks about a number of different, it's just packed with biblical wisdom, godly truth that you can access online, on your phones, to help you pursue God so that you can guard your heart. I want to leave you with one last verse. Getting wisdom is the wisest thing you can do. And whatever else you do, develop good judgment. Getting wisdom is the wisest thing you can do. What destiny do you want to pick? What path do you want to travel on? Because that path determines your destiny. The first step to traveling on the God-directed path, the path that doesn't lead to destruction, the path that doesn't lead to pain and emptiness, is to put your trust in Jesus. Because he gave his life for us so that we would be in a relationship with God. So that we could travel on the God-directed path where we could find true joy and fulfillment in life. But remember, to stay on that path, we're enticed every day. Guard your heart. Guard your heart. Because you can pick your destiny.